If you thought Lost Castle 2 was just another chaotic roguelike where you mash buttons to hit everything in sight, think again, because there is much more depth here than meets the eye. With the 1.0 release, many mechanics have been refined, builds have become more viable, and certain details can literally decide whether your run goes the distance or ends too soon. In this video, I'll show you 10 advanced tips that truly made a difference for me. The kind of things the game doesn't explain well, but which completely changed the way I play. I'm Matthew, and the video is starting right now. If there is one enemy that will test whether you have actually learned to dodge correctly, it's the Wandering Knight. He appears on various routes, so there's no point in turning your nose up thinking you'll avoid him. Sooner or later, you'll cross paths with this walking suit of armor, and you'd better be prepared. The first thing you need to drill into your head is, forget the idea of standing in front of him trading blow for blow. This boss isn't meant to be faced head-on, and if you try to tank him, you'll find out the hard way that your health bar disappears faster than it appears. The secret here is constant movement. As soon as the fight starts, keep your dodge ready and never stop in front of him. What you want to do is navigate the entire fight behind the Wandering Knight. Dodge behind him, land 1 or 2 quick hits, and prepare to exit immediately. Don't get greedy trying to extend the combo, because he doesn't forgive greed. This back and forth dance is annoying at first, but it's exactly how you defeat him without ending up as dust inside the armor. Now, pay attention to the moment he lifts his weapon and starts charging that spinning area of effect attack. That is the ultimate warning sign. When you see him preparing the whirlwind, don't think about attacking, think about surviving. Run, dodge away, and only return when the animation ends completely. Many players die at this stage because they think they can fit in one more hit. You can't. Wait for him to spin, wait for the dust to settle, and only then do you go back to his backside to continue the fray. Ultimately, this fight is more about patience than raw damage. The Wandering Knight is one of those bosses that separates players who just press buttons from those who actually read the battlefield. Keep calm, respect the spin attacks, and remember, you don't need to be the hero standing in front. You need to be the smart one attacking from behind. Do this, and that armor will fall, and you'll even be able to farm him properly in Phantom Nightmare to get that emblem you want so much. Spending on permanent upgrades without thinking about real return is a mistake. For me, the right order makes all the difference, and putting the blacksmith ahead of everything is almost always the smartest decision. It improves the quality of your runs immediately, because it makes rerolls cheaper, facilitates weapon upgrades, and gives you more freedom to test things without that constant fear of wasting resources. I really like prioritizing the blacksmith first because it reduces the feeling of being stuck with a bad choice. When the game allows you to better manage equipment and even recover ingots in certain situations, you gain space to experiment with builds without turning every decision into a permanent punishment. This, for me, is too valuable in a roguelite because good progress isn't just getting stronger, but also suffering less when the run goes sideways. After that, I would place the Alchemist's Hut as the second priority with little doubt, mainly because of defensive and utility resources that help stabilize the campaign. The emergency mechanism, in particular, is the type of upgrade that might not look flashy on paper, but in practice, it avoids that painful run ending because of a silly mistake or an overly chaotic room. It's the type of improvement that doesn't always shine, but when it kicks in, you realize right away how much it secures your progression. As for the ethereal statue, I would leave it for last, not because it's bad, but because it usually adds less immediate value than the other two at the start of the climb. In my view, this order works so well because it accelerates permanent progress and cuts down significantly on the frustration of bad runs, which is precisely what weighs most heavily when you are still consolidating unlocks and learning to optimize resources. In the end, it's a strategy that makes the game less punishing, more flexible, and much more enjoyable to evolve with consistency. It might seem like just another move in your arsenal, but in practice, it completely changes the rhythm of combat. Once you start incorporating aerial attacks naturally, the game stops being just about trading blows on the ground and becomes almost a dance of positioning. What stands out to me most is the absurd mobility this attack offers. While many players are still playing statically, the jump attack allows you to constantly reposition, avoiding damage while maintaining pressure at the same time. This is especially strong against groups because you don't get stuck in the middle of enemies. You go in, hit, and are already on the move. Now, where this really shines is against larger enemies. Instead of standing face-to-face and taking unnecessary risks, you can use the jump attack to flank, strike from the sides, or even from behind, maintaining a safe distance while still dealing damage. This provides massive consistency in the tougher fights, especially as the game begins to punish errors severely, and what's most interesting is that, even as a basic mechanic, it scales very well with skill. At higher levels of gameplay, the jump attack stops being just an option and becomes practically part of your standard combo, whether to extend a sequence or to reposition without breaking the flow. It's the type of simple detail that remains extremely relevant even in the endgame of the 1.0 version. If you enjoy playing a magic build in Lost Castle 2, there is one item that is a complete game changer: the Cursed Pocket Watch. Seriously, once you understand how to use this properly, it feels like you're playing at a different pace. It's no exaggeration to say it becomes the centerpiece of the build, especially in 1.0, where balancing has made this effect even more consistent. The major differentiator is the full mana regeneration, roughly every 20 seconds. This removes one of the biggest limitations of caster classes, which normally need to hoard resources and think twice before using a skill. With the watch, you essentially gain windows of power where you can spend everything without fear, knowing the refill is coming shortly after. And that's where the strategy comes in, aligning your skills with this timing. When you start playing in cycles, spending everything, repositioning, and returning to blast when the mana recharges, combat flows much better. It's not just about spamming, it's about knowing when to spam with maximum efficiency. This makes a huge difference in harder rooms and especially against bosses. The most interesting part is that even being a tier 1 item, it remains absurd at higher gameplay levels. It's not the kind of item you swap out easily. On the contrary, many magic builds simply revolve around it. If you're playing as a caster and not prioritizing the Cursed Pocket Watch, you're leaving a lot of power on the table. If there's one mistake I used to make, and still see many others making, especially in 1.0, it's building full damage thinking you'll steamroll everything. In practice, the famous glass cannon approach works at the start, but at higher difficulties, it becomes a trap. You deal a lot of damage, sure, but you also drop in seconds, and that gets frustrating fast. The point here is to find a real balance between attack and defense. You don't need to turn your character into a slow tank, but adding a layer of survivability makes all the difference. Items like the Cursed Moss Shield fill this exact role. They don't negate your damage, but they ensure you aren't deleted by a silly mistake. And this becomes even more evident in Ethereal Nightmare difficulties, especially in levels 4 and 5 of the 1.0 version. Here, the game shows no mercy. Enemies deal high damage, appear in greater numbers, and any carelessness is costly. If you enter these areas with a fragile build, it's only a matter of time before you lose the run, no matter how well you think you play. You'll notice while playing that balanced builds end up being more consistent in the long run. You survive longer, learn patterns better, and maintain control of the fights. At the end of the day, it's not just about dealing damage quickly, it's about being able to keep fighting. And in Lost Castle 2, especially in the endgame, that is worth far more than high numbers on paper. One of the smartest ways to use the blacksmith is not to act on impulse when a good enchantment appears at a low rarity. Instead of swapping everything and praying for something better, the safest path is to invest ingots to re-roll the rarity or the attributes of an enchantment that already complements your build. This makes more sense because the game's forging system allows for equipment adjustments without necessarily abandoning a promising base. Personally, I like this tip because it counters a very common mistake in roguelites: confusing risk with progress. There are times when we see a useful enchantment and think, I'll swap it, maybe something broken will appear, but this type of gamble can completely dismantle a build that was already clicking well. When you use your ingots to improve what's already working, rather than resetting your luck from scratch, you protect the important attributes and keep your setup's identity alive until the end of the run. In practice, I see this almost as an experienced player's mindset. You stop treating the forge like a casino and start treating it as refinement. If the enchantment already delivers real value to your playstyle, whether it's damage, consistency, or synergy with the weapon, the most efficient decision is usually to evolve that piece, rather than risk losing it entirely. That's exactly where the blacksmith stops being just a random resource and becomes a tool for run control. The most important thing is to understand that a strong build isn't always born from a perfect item, but from several intelligent decisions in sequence. Rerolling the rarity of the right enchantment is one of those decisions, because you extract more potential from what you already have without sabotaging your own progress. For me, this is a truly advanced tip. Less gambling emotion, more build discipline, and in the end, that almost always yields much more damage and much more consistency than swapping a good item for hope. This is a tip I consider too valuable for anyone wanting to make truly strong runs. Many people see a side room and treat it as a detour, as if it were just an optional corner with no real importance. But in practice, these secondary routes are often exactly the type of opportunity that shifts the level of your run, because they frequently hide rewards capable of significantly accelerating your power early on. The most important point here is not to rush through. When you find these side rooms, it is well worth clearing the enemies calmly to unlock access to cells and metal barriers. It is precisely in these spaces that you find demonic storage chests with rewards that can include weapons, armor, or treasure. And honestly, in a roguelite like this, any room that has a real chance to strengthen your build like that deserves immediate attention. Personally, I like this tip because it rewards the attentive player, not just the aggressive one. There are many runs that seem normal at the start, but improve drastically just because you rewards the attentive player, not just the aggressive one, instead of heading straight for the next main fight. Sometimes the difference between an acceptable build and a truly dominant one is born from this habit of scouring the corners of the map and extracting everything the game is offering. For me, the right mentality is simple. A side room isn't a distraction, it's an investment. If you want consistency, more equipment options, and a better chance of assembling a broken build, exploring these areas is practically an obligation. In Lost Castle 2, strength doesn't just come from fighting well, it comes from knowing where to look for an advantage, and those cells with good rewards are exactly the type of detail that separates an average run from one well above average. When you reach higher difficulties, third layer resonance stops being an advanced detail and practically becomes a personal goal within the campaign. It's the type of mechanic that changes how you look at equipment, because you stop thinking only about isolated good pieces and start thinking about real endgame synergy. What I like about this idea is that it forces the player to mature the build. Instead of just stacking strong stats or taking any upgrade that seems overpowered at the moment, you start assembling the character with more intention. The third layer of resonance functions precisely at this more refined level, where the value is not just in raw power, but in how the inscriptions begin to talk to each other and transform the entire set into something much more dangerous. Personally, I view this mechanic as one of the most interesting additions for those who enjoy the endgame, because it rewards planning and long-term reading. At high difficulty, this weighs even more, as the margin for improvisation shrinks significantly and half-ready builds start to fall behind. When you enter a run already thinking about enabling and sustaining third layer resonance, the feeling is that the build finally moves from the strong stage to the absurd stage. I think this tip is advanced because it doesn't talk about surviving a room or defeating a specific boss, but about raising the ceiling of your character. If you've already unlocked the toughest challenges of the 1.0 version, it's well worth treating this resonance as a priority and not a bonus. For me, this is exactly the type of system that separates a good build from a memorable one, because in a roguelite endgame, synergy is almost always worth more than loose strength. This is a tip that honestly completely changes the way I see builds in Lost Castle 2 1.0. When you start mastering inscriptions and resonances, now at tier 3, the game stops being just about picking up strong equipment and becomes almost a synergy puzzle. That's where many builds that seemed only good start to scale for real, because the power doesn't come just from the item itself, but from the way each effect connects with the rest of your setup. The most important point for me is to choose inscriptions that truly speak to your weapon. If you are using a katana like Frostmoon, Ghostly Muramasa, or Demon Spine, for example, it makes perfect sense to look for effects that return energy when using a skill, because that feeds precisely into the aggressive and technical rhythm that this type of weapon demands. Instead of assembling a generic build, you start assembling a build with identity, and that makes a huge difference at higher difficulties. Another part that I find essential is losing the fear of testing rerolls at the blacksmith to hone this synergy. Many people stop at the first good enough result, but the truth is that once you understand what your build is trying to do, rerolling stops being a gamble and becomes fine-tuning. And when you mesh this with Frost or Earthquake synergies, the gain isn't just in damage, it's also in crowd control, safety, and consistency, which carries a lot of weight in more advanced runs. I see Resonance Tier 3 as the point where the build finally stops walking and starts running. It greatly expands the ceiling of combinations and rewards those who pay attention to details instead of just stacking random numbers. For me, the fun of 1.0 is largely in this. You aren't just getting stronger, you are learning to build something with logic, rhythm, and purpose. And when everything clicks, the run simply feels much more powerful. If there's one synergy that truly opened my eyes, especially now in 1.0, it's the combination of Frost with on-being attacked effects. I always underestimated this when you are hit mechanic, but when you commit fully to Frost, it stops being reactive and becomes a machine of control and survivability. The central idea is simple. The more you freeze, the more you protect yourself. And the more you protect yourself, the more time you have to apply damage without interruption. The soul of this build, for me, is in the Frost Moon Katana combined with badges that convert Earthquake into Frost. That already completely changes the identity of your area damage. Now, the real trick comes when you stack items that provide a shield upon freezing or defeating enemies. Suddenly, every kill and every freeze transforms into a small bubble of protection, and you start to create a cycle where attacking and defending cease to be separate things. It's a great gameplay feel because you aren't just killing, you are arming yourself with shields as you advance. To wrap it up in style, I like to add summons and Earthquake Pulse into this mix. The summons draw attention and hold the crowd while the Earthquake Pulse converted into Frost freezes everything around. The result is a mob clear that feels almost automatic, and at high difficulties this is pure gold. You stop feeling like you are being swallowed by enemies and start feeling like you are commanding the battlefield with ice and shields. And if you really want to take this synergy to the extreme, the Maledict Blade enters as a high-risk, high-reward option. It takes away your shield protection, which is scary at first, but compensates by granting Frost based on the shield you would have gained. It's risky, I won't lie, but if you manage the moments of vulnerability well and know when to abuse the freezing, the damage explodes in a way that feels almost unfair. For me, this is proof that Frost and Lost Castle 2 isn't just control. It's also one of the most powerful endgame paths when assembled with intelligence.